It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back from Hometown Commander Epic for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first shot at the commander in front of us on a budget on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out all the links in the description. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're finishing up some Edge of Eternity's commanders, and today we're talking about Tannuk Memorial Ensign. A 3-mana Gruul Kavu pilot with a landfall ability. Whenever a land comes into our control, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and if it's the second time it's gone off in a turn, you're going to draw a card. So it can be slightly confusing, but remember, the first ability is going to go off every time. Every time a land comes in, we're going to deal damage to each opponent, no matter how many times it goes off. Just the second time it goes off, we're going to draw a card. So remember, you're always going to get the first half. It's just the second half that goes off the second time. And so I think the idea is fairly there, right? We're going to get land drops in. We're going to try to get multiple drops per turn. We're going to try to take advantage of some of this new graveyard landfall stuff and maybe try to play lands back out of the graveyard for more and more value. And then because Tannuk and a couple other creatures in our deck can actually deal non-creature damage to our opponent when lands come in, we're going to find a way to modify that damage to deal more and more to our opponents along the way. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early, which is $1 a month, consider checking it down below to support. Well, all right, Landfall's a pretty broad category, and I think truthfully you could probably play just about what you want in this category. But for me, we're just trying to find houses of value, right? Things to make our game plan strong. Avengers Zendikar comes in and makes a plant for each land you control, and then whenever a land comes in, you get to put a counter on each of your plants. Might Farm Harvester is going to double up the power of a creature you control until and determine whenever a land comes in. Can be pretty great for creatures right with evasion or trample to start dealing some big damage. Morag has a really fun ability. Whenever a land comes in, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this one. And at the beginning of that combat, you untap all creatures you control. So the ideal thought here is you attack through your first combat, you go to your second main phase, you play your land, you get an additional combat, all the creatures untap, and then they get a buff every time they've attacked this turn. And technically, you have a chance to drop multiple lands during a main phase if you want to. It would technically spawn multiple combats, although they only untap during one of them. It's just a very interesting card, and hopefully it should just lead to more attacking down the line. Mossborn Hydra comes in with a counter on it. Whenever a land comes in, you double the number of counters on it. Going to make it bigger and bigger. It's a great target for that Might Form. Omnath Locust of Rage makes you a big elemental every time a land comes in. Whenever one of them dies, it could toss out some damage. Another classic landfall payoff in Rampaging Bayless, making a 4/4 beast every time a land comes in. Here we got a pair of damagers in Sabatender and Spitfire Lagak. Both of these are going to deal damage to each opponent whenever a land comes in. So again, doubling up on this ability is great if we can. And we also unlock an interesting sub-strategy. So we have one more of these landfall damaged creatures we'll talk about on the next slide. But I think Springheart and Tuco adds a very interesting dynamic to this. So you bestow it on a creature, meaning you attach it as an aura to a creature you control. And it says whenever a land comes in, you can pay 1 in a green. If you do, you make a copy of the creature that it's attached to. I think these Sabatender, Spitfire Lagak, and then Tunneling GP that we'll talk about the next slide are the perfect things to attach the Nantuko to, basically gaining you more copies of them every time a land coming in. And hopefully you could just hit that bell curve, right, where you have so much damage every time a land comes in. There's that other one in Tunneling GP, dealing 1 damage to each opponent. Tifa, of course, very well loved after Final Fantasy, doubling its power every time a land comes in, making it into a real threat. And then Traveling Chocobo is going to double up on every triggered ability that triggers from a land coming in. Again, very useful. Does let us play lands from the top of our library as well, but basically there to double up on each of these landfall triggers. More damage, more value every time. Again, I think what's going to set Tannuk over the edge is trying to play multiple lands per turn, right? Not just for the ramp factor of it, but for triggering these landfall abilities multiple times. You know, things like Azusa, this is going to let you play additional lands on each of your turns. Dryad lets you play 1 additional on each of your turns, but gives your lands every basic land type so they can tap for either of our colors. Mina and Den lets us play 1 extra per turn, but can pay 2 to bounce a land back to our hand to give a creature trample. It's not the most mana reductive way to bounce lands back to your hand, but note that you can, as long as you have enough mana, continually bounce lands back to your hand and replay them, right? To get value and give creatures trample and take a big turn of playing multiple lands. Oracle Moldiah lets you play an additional land on each of your turn and lets you play them from the top. Zeldinch lets us play an additional land on each of our turn. It grows for each land we control and then bounces a land at our end step. Back to our hand. Awaken the Woods makes a bunch of Forest Dryad land tokens. They are creature tokens, but they're also lands, meaning that you're going to get X landfall triggers, which is a huge ability as you get to the mid to late game, right? Potentially being able to take advantage of a bunch of them. You have things like Entish Restoration, Harrow, Rolling Regrowth. These are a very similar class of ramp spell, something that's in our deck and we're happy to take advantage of. But here, you sacrifice a land and you go get 2 of them and put them on the battlefield, getting you 2 more landfall triggers and 2 more ways to trigger all of our things at the right time. Exploration and Exploration Broodship both allow us to play an additional land as long as we fulfill the steps on the Broodship. But the Broodship actually adds the ability to let us play permanents out of our graveyard by sacrificing lands once per turn, which is relevant. You know, there could be a world where somebody removes something and you want to get it back. But again, Exploration is just so good at letting you play an additional land in each of your turns. You know, the difference between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 lands is a lot. And it doesn't take very long, especially with Tannuk out to draw cards, deal damage, and amass that value. But I think where the deck, takes its advantages from this new Jund Lands precon and some of the stuff coming out is playing lands back out of our graveyard. Now, there's a couple ways you can look at this. Ideally, this is utilizing lands that sacrifice themselves to go get other lands from your deck, normally called fetch lands. You're going to go fetch for a land. That land that you fetched, that you sacrifice, goes to the graveyard, and then it can be replayed back out. We have a couple of these in a budget sense and, higher budget versions of them you can go get. But we need cards that let us play them back out of the graveyard. Things like Ancient Green Warden does that while also packing the ability to double up your landfall triggers. Ice-Steel Explorer is probably one of the best ones because it lets you play an additional land on your turn and lets you play them from the graveyard. And whenever a land comes in, you mill a card, so you potentially could put more lands in your graveyard to play. Remnant Excavator just straight up lets you play lands from your graveyard. Then we have the pretty classic lands into the graveyard combo. You use Scape Shift to sacrifice any number of lands you want. You go search for that many and put them on the battlefield. This is a great way to trigger a bunch of landfall triggers at once. Sacking a bunch of lands and going to get them. And then you can use a spell like Splendid Reclamation or Will of the Sultai just to basically bring all your lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. Again, getting a bunch more landfall triggers, triggering a bunch of things and having a bunch of fun. Will of the Sultai for just 1 more mana adds the ability to give a bunch of counters to a creature where X is the number of lands you control after you do it and give a creature trample, which is kind of nice. And I think it's nice to have 2 versions of this to really take advantage of getting those back. Conduit of Worlds and Crucible of Worlds, of course, lets you just straight up play lands from your graveyard. Conduit, though, does give you the option to tap it to cast a permanent from your graveyard this turn. You just can't cast any other spells. World Soul's Rage, very similar to something like Splendid Reclamation. But the difference is World Soul's Rage will deal damage to a target. Then you could put up to X lands from our hand or graveyard on the battlefield tap. So you get a set number and you get some damage alongside of it. Zuran Orb and Need for Speeds are a way for you to sacrifice land and get them into your graveyard. This is the most ideal way to do it so that you can immediately 1-for-1 play that land back out of your graveyard. You're not going up or down on the amount of lands you have, but you're still getting the value of land coming in, something from the land going to the graveyard, hopefully, and just getting value back and forth. And then Walk-in Closet, meaning you're playing for the walk-in side to have the ability to cast lands from your graveyard. But in the late game, especially if you've churned through your deck, you have the ability to pay 5 and play spells from your graveyard this turn, which isn't a bad idea, right? The deeper that the game goes. We're not going to dive too hard into the damage modifiers. I've tried my best to really do our bread and butter on landfall and playing things in and out of the graveyard. But you have a couple of really key sources that can affect this. The first is O'Hare Axe, and it says whenever a red source we control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than its power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to its power. Note that all of our damagers on ETB for lands are all red. meaning that that 1 damage would turn into 4 for O'Hare Accidental's power. And note that if you were to increase O'Hare Accidental's power with, oh, I don't know, Might Form Harvester, any way to buff other creatures, or buff powers, right? This will get bigger and the damage will be better for us. Torbran just adds two to the damage a red source we control would deal damage to an opponent. So again, 1 to 3, which is still pretty great, right? And that's going to take less triggers, right, to really hurt our opponents. And then you have something like City on Fire, which just triples all damage a source we control would deal to a permanent or player. So that's pretty great too, right? The 1 turns into 3, but then all your combat damage gets worse, right? Or Accidental, just non-combat. Torbrand would be any damage a red source controls, so even in combat we get to take advantage. State on Fire just doesn't care. You can convoke it out, hopefully with these tokens we make on Landfall, tripling up that damage, and hopefully just leading to a good amount of damage into our opponents. But I've said it before in the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first pass at Tannuk, and I think going into testing, I think the one card that I probably should have made more of a room for, but would be one of my cards I'd be looking to bring right back in, is something like Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. So how this card works is it turns all of your non-token creatures into forests as well, meaning every creature coming in is going to be a landfall trigger. No non-token, right? But still very useful, grows for each land you control, and I think the kind of creature fall is something that will eventually lead to value, even if it's only a couple times, right, every now and then. Gladiolus seems interesting, giving creatures trample and a little buff whenever a land comes in. It also goes and searches for any land we want when it comes in. I know it's probably not seeing as much light because it is 6 mana, but I like the idea of this. It's kind of, I think about it, kind of a mini Primeval Titan, and +2/+2 and trample isn't nothing to scoff at, especially when you have big star creatures, even like Ashaya or something like Greensleeves to the right of it, which again grows for every land you control. It makes a 3/3 badger whenever a land comes in. So these star creatures are interesting and something we could look into more of. I just didn't in the effort to play more of the landfall and the graveyard stuff, but it's options to consider for sure. Let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find a magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what are we looking to do, what hands are we looking to keep, and how are we going to set up our game plan. So here we've got a 4-lander with Arcane Signet, Ice, Till, and Need for Speed. We have a way to get lands in the graveyard. We have ways to play lands back out of the graveyard, and we have Tannuk, right? I really like this hand. I think there's a lot of upside to it. So that's going to be a turn 2 Arcane Signet. We can just get the Need for Speed down. Turn 3, I kind of just want to get Tannuk in and start the damage. Riveteer's Outlook is a one of a couple lands we can play that immediately sacrifices itself when it enters the battlefield and goes to get another land. A lot of your other fetch lands, you get to determine when you want to sacrifice them to go get the thing. Riveteer's Outlook does it right immediately. We have a couple more of these we can play in the list, but this is one of those lands that is almost perfect off of Scape Shift, because then it's going to immediately sack itself, put another land in the graveyard, and get some value. So if I just go into Riveteer's Outlook right now, I'm going to get a landfall trigger, and then this automatically sacrifices itself. I'm going to get another landfall trigger and draw myself a card. It may seem a little early to do something like that, but note that I still can immediately play this out of my graveyard next turn, and it's going to continually sacrifice itself, getting all those triggers and helping us out. I don't think I drew, did I? Now that I think about it. So here we see Evolving Wilds, another example of one of those fetch lands. So what's kind of nice is now we have one of them we can be playing back out of our graveyard. So I think we play the Ice Cell Explorer. The question is, would we rather have the Evolving Wilds or the Outlook? Either way, the land's going to come in tapped. Riveteer's Outlook does give us a life, which is somewhat relevant. I'm just trying to think of what makes the most sense. To me, I almost want to just do the Riveteer's Outlook. So this is going to go, it's going to come in, Tannuk trigger, Ice Till trigger. So we're going to mill a card. The Outlook's going to automatically sacrifice itself. We'll go get a forest, put it in. Tannuk trigger, that's going to draw us a card. Ice Till trigger, going to mill us one. We could have done that in either order we wanted to. And now, right, we're just going to continue to get damage if we want to. But we don't always have to do that. Like if we're worried about getting some things out of our hand, we'll just play this mountain from our hand. Again, damage, milling the card. We milled that Green Warden. And now, right, we got what, 3 damage so far? It could have been 4 with the outlook if we chose to get that out of the yard. But it's important to note that this is one of those lines we love to see. So as we come back into our next turn, 6 mana, just a little bit off that Omnath. But I almost kind of want to get Omnath in so that I could really take advantage of that. So forest, damage, mill, play the Omnath, and then my thought is play the let's play let's play the Evolving Wilds. That's going to get me an Elemental. That's another damage from Tannuk, which draws me a card, and I mill one. I'll just draw first and then mill. Great decision. There's Scape Shift, right? And then Ice Till mills me a card. Sorry, that was the Exploration. I just realized I accidentally looked at that one. But crack the Evolving Wilds. Go get a Forest. Again, same thing. 5/5 Elemental off the Omnath. This is why we wanted to get it out, right? Mill a card and draw. I'll draw and then mill. We see Awaken the Woods, unfortunately, hit the yard. I can give Omnath haste with the Need for Speed if I want to, throwing it into the yard, but I think we're looking for a pretty nice Scape Shift next turn, just going deep. I'd love to find some way to kind of modify this damage before I do it. Now, Basilisk Collar is really interesting. It can give Tannuk lifelink, basically meaning that every time it deals a damage to an opponent, we're gaining 3 life, right, for each of our opponents, which is interesting. So as we come to this turn, Traveling Chocobo is probably one of the better draws we can see. So 3 for that there. 3 to play the Collar and attach. So we're 6 mana deep. We still got 2 mana left. But we really want to go, I think, for Scape Shift this turn. If I do that, basically every land that's coming in is doubling up for Tannuk. So that's 2 damage apiece, right, instead of 1. And we're netting all the life. So in my head, my thought is, play the Mountain from hand. 2 damage, I get a card draw trigger and a double mill trigger, right? Because this is going to mill twice. Unfortunately, this is not a May, right? The triggering additional time is not a May, so this is going to get 2. This is going to mill 2, and this is going to draw. I'll draw and then mill 2, and then, well, I guess the Soul Ring does it too. But my thought was play the Shire Terrace on a future turn. This will be able to sacrifice itself to go hit a basic land. 2 more tokens. No more draw. We just mill 2. Right. Now we have the 4 mana for Scape Shift. So we've already done 4 damage this turn. If I sack every land I control, which is 9, and I go look for 9 forests or 9 lands of my choice, that's going to come in, right, deal 18 more damage, right? So we'd be at what, 20 for the turn? Then, I mean, if we wanted to, we could just sack lands to give all these 5/5s haste to get him involved, right? There's a lot of options on what we can do, but I think Scape Shift probably just makes the most sense. We're gaining so much life, we're getting all the elementals, and then, we will mill a bunch more cards, but I don't know that it really matters. I think dealing 20 damage with Escape Shift and then even sacking a couple lands to get some of these guys involved is just going to get really useful for us and deal for some big damage. I think that's pretty much good enough on that one. So let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 4-lander with Mossborn, Zeldinched, and Omnath. Zeldinched, I think, is really nice on the front end, returning lands back to your hand. You play an additional one each turn, but then you get one back, hopefully trying to set one up. I'm not going to play the Terramorphic Expanse yet because it's one of those ones that can go search for one. There we see Fiery Emancipation, another way to get a damage. Whenever a source we control would deal damage to a permanent player, it deals triple that damage instead. So kind of like that City on Fire. The only difference is we can't convoke it out. It's got to come out for 6. But I like Tannuk here. We see Ice Till Explorer again, which is interesting. I'm thinking here Mossborn. Play the Forest, get that there, damage to everybody. And then maybe work towards getting this Terramorphic Expanse in next turn when we can really take advantage of these triggers. And the thought here on the Mossborn is like building up something that's going to really become a threat to our opponent. I like the Ice Till here. Play the Expanse. Double up the counters here. Damage off Tannuk. I got a mill one. Crack the Expanse, right? Go looking for really anything. It doesn't matter. This doubles again. Now we're going to draw off of Tannuk. And then mill off of Ice Till. And we still have another, land play for turn, right? So my thought here is play the Expanse back out of the graveyard. Right. Mossborn doubles, so it's going to be a 32 by the end of this damage for everybody. Mill a card. Sack the Expanse. Again, the point here is make this a threat so that they don't remove something else, right? This is now going to be up to 32 damage, and we mill a card. And I mean, now we're just in good shape. This takes a huge attack this turn. We've got sorry, we played the Ice Till this turn, so no mana up, but now we got enough for like Fire Emancipation. And remember, now with Ice Till, we can continue to play this back out of the graveyard. And then you still got Mossborn Hydra being an issue unless someone can take care of it. So I mean, if it's still there when it comes back to our turn, you just play the Emancipation. Now you're doing 3 a pop off Tannuk. Remember, we got 4 life, right? 4 landfalls, right? Terramorphic, sack it, Terramorphic, sack it. That'd be 12 damage there. And then, you know, Mossborn probably knocks another person out. Now, if somebody gets rid of Mossborn, which isn't necessarily ideal, but it happens, then you think about, do I just Nature's Rhythm for something like Traveling Chocobo? And then I'm going to double up on Tannuk's triggers, deal some more damage out, and then try to get the Emancipation out next turn. You know, there's some interesting lines, right, we could go with from there. But I think you could start to see where that playing out of the graveyard makes it really important. This is just a threat, right? There's so many other threats in the deck that we can use alongside this. We could, Nature's Rhythm for Tifa for 2 and set that up for a future turn. Right? There's so many options of what we can do and how we can really take advantage of threatening the board, right? Well, let's get into playtest number 3 here. Here we see the Tifa and Sabotenders. We've got another damager there. Cast work for some removal. There's the Nature's Rhythm to go get a card out of our deck. There's the Courtyard. I kind of want to see if I can wait as long as possible to play it. I thought there's Sabotender. I'm not entirely sure I can get Tifa big enough right away. Okay, so unfortunately we see another one of these, tapping immediately sackers. So let's do it. It's unfortunate, but I think we got to get it and get it done. At least the damage from the Sabotender, 2 of it this turn. Tifa would be a 4-2, but again, no haste. And as we come back to their turn, now I think Tannuk makes the most sense. Play the Courtyard. Again, damage, double to 2. Automatically sacks. We'll go get a land. Damage, draw. Doubles to 4. See a Geopede, another piece of damage. That's pretty great. We also have something like the Nature's Rhythm, which could help us out. Go get something specific. Take the attack with Tifa if we can, if we have a good attack. Now, I come back to our turn, we pick up some removal in Blasphemous Act, but we ideally want to try to get some lands back from the yard. So, Nature's Rhythm, I'm trying to think, what lets us play lands back from the yard? Ramadek Excavator is 3 mana. We would need 5 mana to go get that. Though that would be pretty useful. I just don't have the mana right to do it. I could go Spelunking to try to draw a card. I'm just trying to think, is there any other cheaper way to play lands from our graveyard on a creature? I mean, Ice still would be 6, right? So we're just a little bit off of that. So I think I'll try the Spelunking. Could draw a card and put a land from my hand on the battlefield. Unfortunate we don't. But now we do unlock the option of World Soul's Rage, getting able to bring 2 lands back from the yard that way, which is interesting. And I think, unfortunately, we probably just got to keep it here. Not hitting the lands wasn't ideal, but we now have a way to get them back pretty effectively. Okay, so there's the Rockfall Veil. Rockfall Veil plus World Soul's Rage for 2 would be 3 initial land drops. 1 off the Rockfall Veil, 2 off those sack lands as they come in, and 2 more when they auto-sacrifice itself. So that's 5 doubles. So Tifa would go from 1 to 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So she'd be a pretty solid attack this turn. That also would be 10 damage from what we have on board. If I Geopede in World Soul for... No, I can't, because Geopede's 3 mana. So I think it's just there, damage there. World Soul's Rage for... I guess I could do it for 3, but I only have 2 lands to bring back, and I don't have a land in my hand, right? So do it for 2 on something. Bring these guys back. We'll just draw off Tannuk first before we go digging. Tifa, right, doubling up. Damage on both of them. Land. Remember, they come in untapped because of spelunking. So we actually have 3 mana left. Damage triggers, right? Tifa's up to that big 32. I think I would just probably get the Geopede in. Tifa takes the big attack. And now on our turn, 2, 4, 6, 7. So air rhythm probably for Ice Till is my thought. Then I can play those back out of the yard, and we're just in good shape. 3 damage apiece. If somebody wants to wipe the board, we at least have the Blasphemous Act that we can do too. But again, if we don't draw Ice Till, I think it's just nature's rhythm for Ice Till. Play them out of the graveyard, and we're just profiting. Right? It's important to find, at least for our build, to find those pieces, right, and deploy them back out of the graveyard. Let's go one more 3-lander here with Exploration Broodship. We see the Crucible of Worlds. We see the Geopede. We see the Ramadec Excavator. So this hand's got a lot of ways to play our things back out of the yard. Play the Broodship. There's a Might Form Harvester. So there's a way to start doubling. I think I like Tannuk here. Tannuk could have gotten the... Tannuk could have stationed last turn. Now this turn, what? Geopede Forest, damage. Go Tannuk into the Broodship. I can play an additional land. Fabled Passage. Damage. I'll draw, crack the Fabled Passage for a... we'll go Forest since we have a Mountain in our hand. All right, damage. Comes in untapped, right? Gotta have enough for this if I want to do it, but I'd almost kind of rather do it on a turn where I can take advantage of something like the Might Form, right? I can tap Geopede to get this up to 7. Maybe just try to get that value while we're there. Now here, right, Crucible of Worlds, Ramadec have the same ability to let me replay this Fable Passage. We do have a lot of basics in the deck. I go Harvester into a land. I can't play either of these, but I can just straight ramp. It would get to double once, twice, 3 times. I almost was thinking maybe something like 8, 16, 32 on the Broodship since it's already in the air, right? We can get it, a creature this turn, and double it. Could be interesting. Let's do that. Turn it online with Tannuk. Mountain for turn, Harvester trigger, and the damages. I'll double Broodship into an 8/8. And let's play the Rampant Growth. Go to get a Forest. Now it's a 16 damage, and that draws me a card off of Tannuk. Then, like I said, we could play a permanent spell from our graveyard, but it has to be a permanent spell, not a land, so we can't get, that back with the Broodship. Attack with that, 16 in the air, right? And then as we come to our next turn, now we want to play something to get things back into the graveyard. Play the Crucible. We've got 4 mana left. Mina and Den, I guess, could be an option. But again, I think we have 1, 2, right? 1 land drop for turn. The one from Broodship. So I think it's just Fable Pack is, sack for a land. That's where Tannuk's going to draw me a card. So I'm again thinking 8, 16 for Broodship. 32. We just make it 16. I was going to say we can make it 32, 64. We can probably just knock somebody out with the Broodship, but again, more damage there. All I played was the Crucible, right? So I've still got enough mana for like Cultivate, Ramp, Kodama's Growth. I still got mana for Farseek, so we could start doubling something else. We could double Tannuk. Interesting. Nothing yet in the graveyard to play, but again, still getting some damage off. We also have like Mina and Den that could go along well with something like Farseek. Because then, let's see what. On a future turn, we can start, right, bouncing things back to our hand to realize he's coming untapped because of that. So we would have enough to return a land back to our hand. My thought was Farseek. Go get a mountain. Double, I don't know. Might forms another, right? No target creature. Double might forms, 2 mana to bring that land back to our hand to give it trample. Now we have a nice decent attack, and I think we've still got a ton of value. And then if somebody wipes the board or tries to, or gets rid of one of our creatures individually, maybe we can use the brood ship to get it back. Although we might just lose the brood ship, but again, we still got other ways, right, to reap things back out of our graveyard. And I think we're just in good shape on this one. We could even start bouncing lands back to our hand with Mina and Den to play to double up that and give that trample and have a good time. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Tannuk down in the comment section below? Really interesting deck. I'm sure there's still some stuff I'm missing in it, but lots of options to deal out damage, double up power, do all that good landfall stuff, and I will catch you all in the next